Hello, this is Parker Brisebois, Parker Thomas Brisebois, first of his name, and you are watching The Iridescent. I was just out at a lake in eastern Washington where it was glorious and warm and sunny and all that good stuff. I'm feeling a little dehydrated because I thought in a previous video I watched, it said that White Claws were hydrating. So I figured I would just, rehydrate my sunburned ass skin by drinking a bunch of seltzer with booze in it. And weirdly enough, it didn't work. So here I am feeling the effects of that, but happy to be back in the studio. Just a disclaimer, we're going to get a little political this time. Some of you aren't super into that, but here's my fucking pitch. The personal is the political is the personal. You should give a shit, okay? You should give a shit about what's going on. It's just, it does affect you in ways you don't even perceive. It's going to affect your kids down the line. It's going to affect you down the line. It's going to affect the relationships you have with your community down the line. If a country moves in a direction based on some type of political goings-ons, some sort of cultural conflict, you know what I'm fucking talking about. It's happening all around us right now, okay? So first, we'll do the culture part, and that is my art. The last of the Dutch Pour series that will forever be immortalized and known and sung of as Parker's First Four. I freaking love these things. This one's kind of the black sheep. People I've showed my art to personally and who've made bids on them. Like the other ones better. The other ones I've shown you. This one's a little bit of a black sheep. I think it's because it's kind of somber and the color scheme's challenging. It's not bad. In my opinion, it's not overly complex. I didn't use more colors in this one, but the end result is just a little more ominous. Conveys a little bit of angst. Not everybody's into that. I'm super into it. I'm all about that angst. So anyways, I call this one Lovecraft in Autumn. It's a reference to H.P. Lovecraft, who was an author who wrote in the turn of the 20th century. Not the turn, maybe 1930. He was most famous for writing stories about Cthulhu. If you're unfamiliar with Cthulhu, he's the creature he wrote about, because it's a horror creature, is this godlike being that is totally inhuman and doesn't like the human race very much, but is older than time itself and lives behind the stars and also at the bottom of the ocean at the same time. And a lot of the themes that he explores is just mind-bending terror that comes from confronting existential angst. Cthulhu is commonly depicted as the tentacle-faced monster guy with wings and stuff, amphibian. You've probably seen him if you're any kind of nerd, and if you're watching this show, you're probably some kind of nerd. But yeah, Cthulhu is really sort of a manifestation or an embodiment of existential terror. The big thoughts when you get a little gnarly about thinking about how huge the universe is and how limited we are as individuals and how scary it is to be one little mote floating around in a big vast void that just doesn't give a shit about you. That's pretty scary, and that's good material to write with, and H.P. Lovecraft did that. And he interesting biographical stuff about him, because who thinks like that, right? What happens to a human brain to where they're like, oh my god, I can't stop thinking about the big nothing. I must write this story about an octopus face creature, dragon thing, god, I don't know. But what happened to him was he grew up in New England and went to school out there, and then started going into his professional career. He moved to New York City, which was exploding at the time. I mean, it's been exploding since forever, but it was huge. And he felt like the tiniest little minnow in the vast ocean that he just felt like he could not connect to, could not relate to. And it terrified him. And he struggled and floundered a while out there, and then eventually just said, screw this, I'm going back to New England, where he wrote, and a lot of his stories take place in New England, which makes sense because authorship is often biographical. So he uses the flavors of his life and his experience to inform the stories he writes. I just think that was pretty interesting to think about somebody from a quiet place going into a loud, very human place and coming out of that with so much dread inspired in them that they couldn't help but think about how alienating it is to be an individual in a world that's exploding with expanded systems, intense information, just hustle and bustle beyond anything we ever evolved to get a full comprehension of. I call this Lovecraft in Autumn because, well, autumn, first of all, because it's got ochre colors and all that. It looks like autumn. And to me, this looks like Cthulhu's face coming out of the void. I see tentacles there. And that conveys a lot of dread and angst to me now because I live in Washington. And we still have 4 full seasons. They're not all created equal. This was culture shock for me because I come from California where we have 2 seasons and they are fire season and not fire season. First headline, the Milwaukee Bucks boycott Game 5 of their NBA Final Series. Or not final, playoff series. Amazing. This is an example of athletes, professional basketball players who have a tremendous platform using it to push an agenda and advocate for people that they feel need advocating for. And talking specifically about Jacob Blake and the ongoing pandemic of police violence against minority communities, specifically black communities, all throughout the country. And the NBA is the perfect vehicle for this because basketball, professional or otherwise, as a spectator sport, is highly personal. There are only 5 players out there. They take up most of the court. Well, 5 on each team. So not that many players. They take up most of the court themselves, especially in the NBA because these are just giant people. And their faces aren't covered by anything. With the camera, with going to see games, you really feel like you're present with other human beings who have thoughts and feelings and emotions about all stuff that you do, presumably. And that visibility humanizes them, makes them easier for people to relate to, and when those athletes who have an informed position, one they feel has integrity and value that they want to share to you because you can see them and feel like you're connecting them with them, that message is more easily conveyed. And in this particular circumstance, this injustice, the injustice of bam, 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 was that 7? Point blank into the back of this guy who was not even the person that the original call was for, by a white police officer and a black man with kids in his fucking car. That is another symptom in this illness that we're dealing with as a country, and the NBA has been decrying these atrocities the entire time with their political messaging all over the court. The fact that all the players are allowed to have messages on their back where their last name would be, and this is them putting their money where their fucking mouth is. Because the thing with political messaging, well, not just political messaging, but messaging in general, is in some ways talk is cheap. Like, I think that's a pretty basic way to think about it, because obviously there's value in being able to talk about stuff. In fact, it's necessary to talk about stuff, but the issue is that that's just where that ends for a lot of people in a lot of organizations. It ends with the talk, and that might be because it was a cheap publicity stunt, or because they don't actually believe in it, or they later found out that that wasn't as, from a market point of view, as advantageous of a messaging line to go down. But the NBA, the players themselves said, fuck that. This is what we believe in. This is what is on the line for us and our communities from where we come from. And we are not going to provide to the American people what the American people think they deserve from us, which is the entertainment, the spectacle of professional basketball. And if you're watching this video, you probably have a lot of your baseline shit covered. So what that allows us to do is indulge in hobbies and things to distract ourselves with, right? Otherwise, we're thinking about Cthulhu and the end and the big nothing, right? The stuff that makes life worth living is stuff we enjoy engaging with. And for a big part of America, big part of the world, that's professional sports, right? Okay, I don't want to think about food and all this shit because it's covered. Now I'm relaxing. Okay, let's turn on the TV. Oh, I love basketball. Sweet, I'm gonna watch it. But it's Game 5. It's 2020. We're in the NBA restart bubble, and you don't get to fucking watch your basketball. You know, you don't get to watch your basketball. And you know why? That's because there's shit going on in the real world that's affecting people on that life and death level, and those entertainers, those athletes say, nope, nope. Because even if you're apolitical or you disagree with them, but you're watching basketball, it forces you to engage with that real thing that happens. Because part of the problem is people just don't engage. They act like police brutality doesn't happen. That George Floyd's murder was like last season and we don't talk about that anymore. No, fuck that. It's happening all the time. Politics is personal. The personal is political. And you cannot divorce those things. So you need to engage with those things. Otherwise, the horrible things that you can either earnestly decry or ignore will continue to happen. And regardless of your relationship to them, those events, those systems of oppression are horrible. And they're causing people terrible injury and death and generations of disadvantages. And the least you could do is turn off the basketball for a fucking game to get yourself a little more informed. You know, have a conversation with somebody who is affected by police brutality or systemic racism, whatever. Just, you know, come out of the la la land and think about your place in a big, scary Cthulhu world. Okay. Yeah, and that kind of brings me to my next thing, which is a call to arms. We often think about in terms of it being a big Cthulhu world. Well, what am I going to do? You know, I'm just an electrician. I'm just a salesman. I just sell real estate. I just work in an office. I work under construction. I work at a zoo. Like, I'm trying my best to be good at that. I'm trying my best to be good in my relationships. I'm trying my best to be healthy and good to myself. How could I possibly try to confront the Leviathan that is the world's issues? How could I slay that dragon when shit, I can barely keep my head above the water in my own life, right? Well, that's a good question because it's incredibly difficult, and it's really easy for people who do think about the big issues all the time to throw their hands up at it because it is frustrating and complicated and feels inaccessible. But I think the mature thing to do and the responsible thing to do is pay attention to what is right there in front of you as a tool to access that stuff around you. Go to protests. Have conversations with people. Learn. And those all sound soft and squishy, but that shit matters. We're a social species. The more people are doing a thing, the more that is the reality for all of us. And because we live in the biggest community we've ever lived in, you know, what with the internet and stuff, the more people give energy to this type of behavior, to this type of conviction, social justice, the more it's going to be a real thing. And the more the more progress is going to be unavoidable. It might be slow and grinding, but you got to put every little drop in the bucket that you can. And it's probably only a couple drops. You know, it's probably not a lot just from you. Some of us might be, you know, public figures and shit, but you know, you got to do your part. And one of those things, for fuck's sake, vote. Just vote, man. I was thinking about this because I was listening to I think it was a Underachievers album or something like that. Underachievers or Flatbush Zombie or something. There's a band or a music group that my brother introduced to me when I was way younger, and at the time I didn't like rap music, so I didn't give it nothing, but it started popping up on some of my playlists, and I think the album's called Indigoism, and it reminded me of the concept of indigo children, right? You know what an indigo child is, supposedly? Well, anyways, it was this like pseudoscientific New Age theory that emerged in the United States around the 1970s that believed that basically just some kids were born different in a positive way. Like they were just more gifted, sort of almost like psychically talented, didn't really need to be raised by their parents because they were already possessed of this ancient wisdom that was intrinsic to them. They were just born with it. Basically, they were the fucking chosen one. They were Anakin Skywalker. They were Harry Potter. They were all the chosen ones, right? And you look at that happening in the 1970s, which was still a time of economic affluence and growth, right? So our needs are being met at a higher and higher rate ever. So that gives rise to opportunity for people to sit around and play with ideas because their material needs are being met. So it gives rise to a bunch of ideas, including wacky ones like that. But even though the idea that indigo children are being born and every other child is the chosen one is patently ridiculous and obviously false, there was this cultural shift where people had so much more time and energy, and there was more research coming out around the benefits of being more, I'm not saying parents before that weren't loving, but like attentive, and to instill into your children that they were special. And I know that that's a mentality that millennials get knocked for, but it's a mentality that I see among us. We think we're special. I think I'm special. I wouldn't be jobless making this show if I didn't think I was special to some degree. But it's a double-edged sword. Because some people think that because they're special, they don't have to do things the same way other people's do. They don't have to engage with the world because they're the chosen one and it's just going to work out for them. And whatever they believe in is actually right because they are the indigo child. They're motherfucking Luke Skywalker, right? And I see a lot of that with apolitical young folks who, specifically in these times, want to just throw their hands up at politics because they think it's too divisive, too exhausting. Humans are social animals. We want to get along with each other. But in today's American politics, nobody gets along with anybody. So it's for the birds. We don't want to do that. It's not cool, right? Also, it's challenging, and people don't like to be challenged. And I was just thinking about that because I see that among young people whose worldview tends to skew, by and large, a little bit left. That's kind of a lazy distinction, but they're more communal. They're more progressive because they're younger, so they don't just naturally truck with ideas that are from a generation ago for their own sake. There's a propensity for them to want to be apolitical because a lot of values on the left are sort of common sense communal. Like if I'm just getting along with everybody around me, I'm living out the values I really care about. I just want to have fun and live in a world, where people aren't fighting each other. I just want to like party and have a good time and hang out with my friends and try to get laid and blah, blah, blah. That's great. That's kind of what a lot of most people only want to do anyway. But you got to fucking check your privilege, man. Because if you'd rather do that than get any kind of politically engaged, politically informed, politically active, at least to the point where you don't even vote, right? Like, then you're just as bad as extremists pushing for some shit that's gonna make everybody less safe and make you less able to live out your like teenage dream, fucking party like a rock star until you're 28, right? You're not gonna be able to do that going forward in a world where shit's just ever and ever more and more fucked up. So the comparison I would make, and this is an issue I have with a lot of conservative thinking, is that it's polarized in terms of politically good and evil. There is objective good and there's objective evil. And because I'm me and I'm the protagonist of my own story, I identify with objective good. And when your thinking is that binary and that simple, you're probably going to attach good and evil rather frivolously. And you'll probably defer to cultural upbringings. So, for example, with a lot of conservatives, you see single issue voting centered around abortion. And that's a pretty solid framework. If you truly think that you are ending a life in the truest sense when you're getting an abortion or an abortion is happening, then that's murder and that's evil. And to be against that is to be good. And that's the end of story politically. You're good if you support this, you're evil if you, or no, sorry, you're good if you oppose this, you're evil if you support this, right? And then a almost uniquely American folly is that, okay, well, if you're anti-abortion, you're also pro-guns, you're pro-tax cuts, you're anti-environmental regulation. You know, we bundle our politics. That's the two-party system in a nutshell. So that's where you see a lot of like the most vehement conservatives are just single-issue voters because they believe beyond a doubt, they're not questioning themselves, that they are good and they are righteous. And even if they actually think healthcare for all would be a really good idea if they could break it down and separate it from political discourse, they're opposed to it because that's what the evil abortion advocates like, right? So good and evil's bad in that way. But going back to those Indigo children, those party kids, those apolitical, lightweight leftists who'd just rather live their teenage dream till they're 28, what you see here is I'm hearing a lot of young people talk about how they don't want to vote for Joe Biden because that's just going to be another old white guy with a checkered past or some bullshit. I don't know, man. People could kick up dirt on anybody about anything. And most of it is either baseless, overblown, totally fucking made up, or like just completely pales into comparison to what it's being compared to. Fucking Trump, an absolute rape apologist and philanderer and awful person. But they don't want to vote for Joe because they see another old white guy that some people take issue with. And the reality of it is a vote for Joe is a vote for a party and a platform that's just got better things in mind for you. And I said already, I didn't vote for Joe Biden in the primary, but I was dead set if he won, I was going to vote for him. And I am going to vote for him. But that's because I'm able to make the tactical decision to pick between the lesser of two evils. And ye Indigo children, who I beseech please vote, are often caught in this trap where like, well, it's just one guy or that guy. I want to disengage from the whole thing. But to vote is to engage with the only tool you have in front of you. What are you going to fucking do? You're going to go burn the White House down and like establish like a communal junta with you and your bros, with you and your gals, with the homies? No, you're not going to fucking do that. You don't even know how government works. So vote for the lesser of two evils. And the reason that people don't want to be doing that in this apolitical young demographic is they feel like they're too important to be forced to choose between the lesser of two evils. And that's just immature. You're just being childish if that's what you're stuck in, if that's your go-to rationalization. And if you can't get your head around that, or you want to tell me to fuck off and just keep, party, don't learn, don't talk, then you're just fucking sheep, man. And come at me. Maybe you think I'm just a nerd, but you're the one who's going to keep working your 9 to 5, bitching about taxes, but also bitching about racists, but also bitching about how the system's corrupt because, you can't get the healthcare you want. Engage with it. You have to engage with it. Believe me, I've been through the burn it down phase. It doesn't go anywhere. So go to protests, get learned, vote, talk about it. So, anyways, today was truly a ramble, and I hope you'll forgive me. But I hope we had fun along the way, because I know I did. I'll be back at you with another episode sooner rather than later. I swear I'll keep it light next time. But for now, Parker Brisebois, you've been watching The Iridescent. Peace!